It's just so heartbreaking that she was able to survive cancer, but she wasn't able to survive this.
They took the seats off, and that's where they found blood.
He's been seeing her on the side while he has a whole wife at home.
They found the blood under the car seats, not on top, where you'd expect it if someone had just been shot. Under them. Hidden. Scrubbed, but not gone. Tabitha Milton Rush had been murdered in that vehicle. Shot twice in the left temple. Then driven 30 miles north and dumped in a ravine. The man who killed her had a secret. A whole wife at home who thought she was protecting him with an alibi. But when investigators pulled the phone records, two signals lit up the screen. His phone and Tabitha's phone, riding together toward the exact spot where her body would be found 5 days later. The truth came from the woman he married to be his shield. It's heartbreaking that Tabitha survived breast cancer only to be killed by the one danger she couldn't see coming. But to understand how it came to this, you have to go back to the beginning. This story won't leave you unchanged. Before we continue, drop a quick comment for me. Is it morning, afternoon, or late night where you are right now? I read your comments more than you think. Thank you for sharing. Quick note. This story includes some fictionalized details added to convey the emotional truth. What matters most is the message behind it, for a woman who spent a year measuring life in scan results. Next year was not a calendar phrase. It was a thing she wasn't sure she'd get. Tabitha Milton Rush, 44, had spent the past year measuring life in scan results. And now, 6 months cancer-free, she was finally ready to believe in next year again. Her house in Street. Lewis had always been full of people who came just to be near her. Friends drifted through her kitchen, stayed for dinner without being asked, lingered on the couch with coffee that went cold while they talked. The sound of laughter filled her home even through the worst of the treatment, even through the months when she wasn't sure she'd see another Christmas. Now she was opening herself to something she'd kept closed for years, the possibility of romance. After her divorce in 2009, after the long stretch of being single, after surviving what so many don't, she was ready to see what was out there. Glenn Jenkins was an old high school friend who'd sent her a Facebook request. And 25 years later, they picked up right where they'd left off, his positive energy making her feel genuinely safe. They started seeing each other, casual and easy, 2 or 3 times a week. "I'm just glad you sent me that friend request," she told him one evening. And meant it. After a year of being seen as a survivor, it felt good to just be seen. It's only natural to play the field after being single for a while to see who fits. Who makes you laugh? Who sees you as more than what you've been through? A few days later, Tabitha was having dinner at a restaurant when a stranger approached her table, a local chef. Charming and outgoing. The kind of energy that made someone feel alive. His name was Raymond Reed. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Yeah, sure," she said. He sat down across from her like they'd known each other for years. Confident. Fun. "You are absolutely gorgeous," he said, leaning in just enough to make it feel personal. She laughed, thanked him, felt the flattery land. Raymond told stories that made her smile, had the kind of charm that felt like sunshine. By the time the plates were cleared, Tabitha was thinking about where this might go. She had 2 men in her life now, both interested. Both making her feel things she hadn't felt in years. It felt like possibility. It felt like the future she'd fought so hard to claim was finally opening up. Full of choices she got to make for herself. Tabitha had no way of knowing that one of the 2 men she'd let into her life was already married to a woman she'd never heard of. She had no way of knowing about the history of violence nobody had told her about. The phone calls started 3 days after their first dinner. 1. Then 5. then 40 in a single night when Tabitha didn't answer. In the weeks before January 2013, Raymond's pursuit intensified into something nobody around Tabitha could call romance anymore. When she didn't respond immediately, he called again, and again. And again 40 times in a row, her phone lighting up in the dark while she tried to sleep. He left strings of unanswered texts, each one more insistent than the last. He posted from her social media accounts in her voice, writing updates she never approved, words she never said, building a version of their relationship that existed only in his mind. And he pressured her constantly to marry him and move to Oregon. "We're meant to be together, you know that," he'd say, leaning in close, his voice dropping to something that felt like intimacy but sounded like demand. "The only way we can make this happen is if you agree to come with me to Oregon." The people who loved Tabitha watched the pattern unfold with growing alarm. They saw her phone light up again and again while they sat together in her kitchen, watched her glance at the screen and silence call after call. They told her they didn't like that she was with him, that something about Raymond felt wrong. "He called you 40 times in one night. That's not love." But Raymond framed it all as devotion. He was just passionate. He just loved her so much. He couldn't stand to be apart from her. That's what he said. And for a while, that's what Tabitha tried to believe. To Raymond, this was love. To everyone watching Tabitha, it was a countdown.
And I think her exact words were, he was a cheater and a beater.
Records an order of protection filed after he'd turned violent. He'd punched her, choked her, stabbed her with a knife. The violence was severe enough that she took legal action to keep him away from her permanently. The devotion Tabitha saw was the same leash another woman had to legally cut. Keep that detail in mind. The pattern doesn't change, only the person caught in it. Raymond Reed had a history of controlling the women he dated. He had a history of violence when they tried to leave. And he had something else Tabitha didn't know about. Something buried beneath the 40 calls and the fake posts and the pressure to run away with him to a state where nobody knew either of them. The man calling 40 times a night, begging Tabitha to marry him. Posting from her accounts like he already owned her voice. He already had a wife at home. At 1:45 in the morning on New Year's Day, Tabitha Milton Rush felt perfectly safe. Her ex-husband Michael Grainer dropped her at Glenn Jenkins's house after a party, and she kissed Glenn goodnight on the porch. The new year stretched ahead like a promise she'd beaten cancer. She had people who loved her, and Raymond's obsessive calls had quieted for a few hours. She spent the morning with Glenn. They talked about the future. She didn't mention the 40 calls from the week before, or the way Raymond's voice had turned sharp when she said she wouldn't move to Oregon. Glenn drove her home just after 2 in the afternoon, and she waved from her doorway as he pulled away. What Tabitha didn't see, the car parked down the street. The neighbor, a man who'd lived on the block for 15 years and knew which vehicles belonged and which didn't, noticed it immediately. A sedan. Engine off. Windows dark. Someone sitting behind the wheel, motionless, watching Tabitha's house. The neighbor thought about calling someone, then decided it wasn't his business. People park on streets. People wait for friends. By the time he looked again, the car was gone. At 5:30 that evening, Debbie arrived. She was Tabitha's closest friend. The kind who showed up without calling first. The kind who could read Tabitha's face and know when something was wrong. They sat in the living room and talked about nothing important. New Year's resolutions. Plans for the week. Whether Tabitha should finally tell Raymond to stop calling altogether. Then the doorbell rang. Raymond stood on the porch, smiling. Tabitha opened the door but didn't invite him in. Debbie watched from the couch, uneasy. Raymond's voice was light, friendly, like the calls and the fake Facebook posts and the pressure to move across the country had never happened. He said he wanted to talk. Tabitha said not tonight. He said he'd come back later. She said, maybe tomorrow. Debbie stood to leave. She hugged Tabitha at the door and made her promise to call if Raymond came back. Tabitha promised. She stood in the doorway and waved as Debbie drove away, the same way she'd waved to Glenn 6 hours earlier. Debbie would be the last person who loved Tabitha Milton Rush to see her alive. When investigators pieced together the timeline later, they'd mark this moment in red. 5:30 p.m., January 1st, 2013. After this, the only witness to what happened inside that house was the man who said he loved her. The man with a wife at home. The man whose ex-girlfriend had an order of protection because he'd punched her, choked her, stabbed her. The man who was standing on Tabitha's porch, smiling, saying he'd come back later. He did. 5 days later, a man walking his dog along a rural highway in Bethalto, Illinois, noticed something in the ravine that made him stop. What Raymond Reed did when he came back to Tabitha Milton Rush's house on January 1st remained hidden for 5 days. What he left behind would not. At 9 in the morning on January 5th, 2013, the dog walker thought he'd spotted trash below. He moved closer. What he saw made him pull out his phone. "Oh my God," he said when the dispatcher answered. "We need police out here right now." The investigators from Bethalto Police arrived within minutes. They experienced enough to read the scene before touching it. A woman's body lay in the ravine, partially concealed by brush. She'd been shot twice in the left side of her head. But what they didn't see told them more. No blood spatter. No casings. No sign of a struggle. "Looks like gunshot wounds," one said. His partner nodded. "No blood spatter, she wasn't killed here." For anyone who's watched crime scenes, that absence is the loudest detail. A gunshot to the head creates spatter, arterial spray, tissue, evidence. This ravine had none. The real crime scene was somewhere else, most likely a vehicle, 30 miles south in St. Louis. Missing persons detectives had a case that suddenly felt urgent. "We've got one that's missing. We think this might be her," one said over the phone. The description matched Tabitha Milton Rush. 44, mother of 2, breast cancer survivor. Last seen January 1st. The family confirmed the identification within hours. The woman in the ravine was Tabitha. The first 48 hours of an investigation are critical. They're when memories are fresh, when witnesses remember details, when evidence hasn't been contaminated or destroyed. They were already 120 hours behind. They moved fast. Ex-husband Michael Grainer explained he'd dropped Tabitha at Glenn Jenkins's house at 1:45 in the morning on New Year's Day, then gone to his girlfriend's place. His girlfriend confirmed it. Glenn's timeline matched Tabitha spent the morning with him. He drove her home around 2. Both men cooperated fully. Investigators believed them. But the last man seen with Tabitha, the one who'd shown up at her door while Debbie was there, the one who'd said he'd come back later, that man had a different story. Raymond Reed told investigators he was in Oregon. "I'm in Oregon, belated trip to visit my family," he said when they reached him by phone. A belated Christmas visit, 2,000 miles away. It was the kind of alibi that should have cleared him immediately. Out of state, visiting family, easily verifiable, but it was also too perfect. The boyfriend with violence in his past. The man whose ex-girlfriend had an order of protection. The last person to see the victim alive, and he just happened to be across the country when she turned up dead. The trip to Oregon was the thing that finally made them stop trusting him. because they decided to check it. Raymond Reed's phone went straight to voicemail. The investigators had decided to check his Oregon story, but first they needed to talk to him. They called once. Voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. For hours that afternoon, every attempt hit the same silence. Still no answer, one said. Hanging up. His partner looked at the phone log. 10 calls in 3 hours. He's not picking up. He knows we're looking. It's the kind of silence that tells you everything. An innocent man picks up when police call. An innocent man cooperates. Explains. Offers to help. A man whose phone goes dead the moment investigators start asking questions. That's a man running the clock. Then, just before 6 that evening, Raymond resurfaced. Raymond Reed is here, the desk officer said. Investigators looked up. Here, as in, walked into the Bethalto police station himself. Voluntary. Cooperative. He brought someone with him. The woman beside Raymond was calm, steady. The kind of presence that makes a statement without saying a word. Faith Tyler walked into the police station beside her husband Raymond, ready to swear she'd been with him all night on January 1st. The wife, Tabitha, had never heard of, now becoming Raymond's shield. "I'm his wife," Faith said when investigators asked who she was. They already knew about the secret marriage from earlier background checks. But hearing Faith claim it out loud, standing beside the man who'd been dating Tabitha, the man whose ex-girlfriend had an order of protection, added a new layer to the deception. Faith had come to do one thing: protect her husband. "I was with him all night on January 1st. He never left the house," she said. Her voice was certain. No hesitation. No doubt. She looked at them like she was delivering proof, not an alibi. The wife is the last brick in the wall, and she believes, for now, that she's protecting an innocent man. A spouse's word carries weight. It's not evidence exactly, but it's close. Harder to dismiss than a friend's account. Harder to break than a coworker's memory. Faith Tyler seemed genuine. She seemed certain. She seemed like someone who'd spent the entire night with her husband and knew he couldn't have hurt anyone. Raymond stood beside her, looking relieved, looking vindicated. "You have the wrong guy," he said. He let the words hang, then said it slower. "Just so you know, you have the wrong guy." The Oregon story and Faith's all-night alibi made a shield they couldn't immediately penetrate. Out of state for a Christmas visit, home with his wife all night. How do you charge a man with murder when his spouse swears he never left? They couldn't. Not yet. A wife's word is hard to break, especially when she seems so sure. But it turned out Raymond Reed had never actually gotten on a plane to Oregon, and once investigators proved that lie, every other word he'd said would become a question. The January 2nd flight manifest from St. Louis to Oregon came back within hours. Faith Tyler's alibi had seemed unbreakable, but investigators knew one way to test the foundation: verify Raymond's Oregon story. If he'd flown out for a belated family visit the day after New Year's, his name would be on a passenger list. They requested manifests for every flight to Oregon on the morning of January 2nd. The airline provided them quickly. "His name should be on this flight," one said, scanning the morning departure Raymond had mentioned. They went through the names once, then twice. Raymond Reed wasn't there. Check it again every January 2nd flight to Oregon. They pulled every manifest for that day. Morning flights, afternoon flights, evening departures. They expanded the search to January 1st and January 3rd, covering the 48 hours around Raymond's claimed timeline. Every passenger list, every seat assignment, every name. Raymond Reed's name wasn't on any of them. He hadn't flown to Oregon. He hadn't flown anywhere. He's not on it. The airline doesn't make mistakes about who boards a plane. A passenger manifest is one of the few pieces of evidence that doesn't lie. Either a person flew or they didn't. There's no gray area. Raymond Reed had told investigators he was in Oregon visiting family for a belated Christmas trip. The manifests said he'd never left Missouri. The Oregon story wasn't just suspicious anymore. It was a provable lie. And once one piece breaks, every other statement becomes suspect. If he lied about this, he's lying about all of it, one investigator said. His partner nodded. So where was he really? That's the question a lie creates. If Raymond wasn't in Oregon on January 2nd, where had he been on January 1st? If he lied about the belated family visit, what else was invented? Faith's alibi said Raymond had been home with her all night, but Faith had already proven she'd believe her. Husband over the evidence. The Oregon lie wasn't just about geography. It was about credibility. If Raymond lied about Oregon, what else was he lying about? And more importantly, where had he really been? The manifest pointed investigators to the one piece of evidence that would answer that question. Get a subpoena for his phone records, one said. Location data, call logs, everything. Cell phones don't just record calls and texts. They ping towers, mark locations, build a map of everywhere the phone...
He didn't fly to Oregon that morning. He didn't fly anywhere.
The phone that went dead the moment investigators started asking questions. The phone he'd been carrying on the night Tabitha died. That phone was about to tell them exactly where he'd been. The subpoena went through fast. Within hours, investigators had the authorization to pull Raymond's cell records. The subpoena came back with 2 phones on it, Raymond's and Tabitha's. And the location data was about to show something the investigators couldn't have predicted. The 2 phones had spent New Year's night moving as one. The cell tower pings from the evening of January 1st resolved into dots on a screen. The subpoena had come back covering 3 phones, Raymond's, Tabitha's, and Faith's. We've got all 3 phones here, one said. Run the evening of January 1st. Let's see where everyone was. Cell tower pings don't lie. Each one is a timestamp and a coordinate that locks a phone's position to within a few hundred yards. Investigators overlay the location data, watching the evening translate into movement across a map. 3 phones, 3 different stories, except 2 of the stories were the same. Wait, look at this, one investigator said. Raymond's phone and Tabitha's phone lit up together, pinging from the same towers at the same timestamps. They were moving together. Same route. Same interstate heading north toward Bethalto. Mile after mile. The 2 signals rode in parallel. Both phones in the same vehicle. They're together, same route, same time. The map drew itself. St. Louis to Bethalto. The exact route to the ravine where Tabitha's body had been found. Her phone and his phone locked together. Traveling north. Before we see where that signal ends. Are you still with me? Comment A if you think Raymond's about to confess, or B if you think he'll blame someone else and add one reason in 5 to 10 words. Please note the next part includes some dramatized details for emotional impact. The documented evidence is what matters. Investigators watched the 2 signals travel together, and then, at a specific coordinate just outside Bethalto, Tabitha's phone went silent. The ping stopped. The signal died. Her phone stops here, right where we found the body. It was the exact location where her body had been discovered 5 days later. Each time-stamped ping before that final silence was a mile she was still alive. And the moment it stops is the moment she died. The map had drawn a line from Tabitha's last position straight to where Raymond dumped her body. His phone kept pinging after hers went dark, continuing north, turning around, heading back south. He'd driven her there, killed her there, left her there. And Faith's phone, one investigator asked. His partner pulled up the third signal. Never left St. Louis, not once. While Raymond's and Tabitha's phones rode together to the dump site. Faith's phone sat stationary across town all night. A quiet line on the map that destroyed any claim Raymond might make that his wife committed the murder. Faith had been exactly where she said home. Alone. Nowhere near Bethalto. The defense he hadn't thought to use yet was already demolished. With the phone map in hand, investigators brought Raymond into a room and laid it in front of him. His signal. Her signal. The road. The silence where she ends. And when the walls closed in, he gave them a name they never expected. His own wife's. Raymond Reed sat alone at the table. The door shut. The flight manifest and the phone map face down in front of him. The name he'd given his own wife's hung in the air. "Where were you on the evening of January 1st?" one investigator asked. Raymond repeated his story. Went to Tabitha's house around 5:30 p.m., then home to Faith. He added details about panicking, about making up Oregon because he thought they'd suspect him. "I panicked, that's why I said Oregon," he said. His eyes kept drifting to the folder. The evidence he couldn't see but knew was waiting. The investigators let the pauses stretch. Then one reached for the folder and pulled out the phone map. "Your phone and her phone together all the way to where we found her body." They laid it between them. Raymond stared at the two signals riding north, at the silence where Tabitha's phone died. He'd run out of road. The Oregon lie was exposed. The phone data put him at the dump site. In the quiet, Raymond made his choice. He named Faith Tyler. Said she'd been in the back seat. Said she'd shot Tabitha twice while he was driving. That he'd panicked and dumped the body. That he'd been protecting his wife. The shield he'd built. The hidden wife. The Oregon lie. The all-night alibi. Was about to turn in his hand and cut him. In a separate room. Faith Tyler told investigators a different story. Raymond had come home around 11 p.m. on January 1st with blood on his hands and clothes. Said someone tried to rob him. That he'd killed them in self-defense. That he needed help. She'd believed him. She'd gone to the store with him to buy cleaning supplies. She'd helped clean blood from the car because she thought her husband had defended himself. He came home bloody, said it was self-defense, Faith said. I gave him an alibi because I believed him, but she hadn't shot anyone. Hadn't been in any back seat. Hadn't been near Bethalto. Her phone proved that. The forensic examination of Raymond's car told the rest. Blood under the unbolted seats. Tabitha had been shot there. In the vehicle. Surveillance footage from the supermarket showed Raymond and Faith together after 11 p.m. on January 1st, buying bleach and cleaning rags. Then there was ballistics. The angle of the shots impossible from the back seat, the examiner explained. 2 bullets to the left temple, fired straight on. A right-handed woman sitting behind the driver couldn't achieve that trajectory. The shooter had been beside Tabitha. The blood under the seats. The store cameras. The angle of 2 shots. A woman in the back seat could never have fired. Every wall he'd built came down on the man who built it. Raymond Reed was charged with first-degree murder on January 6, 2013, one day after the interrogation that dismantled every defense he'd built. The blood under the seats. The store cameras. The ballistics report proving a backseat shooter was impossible. His own wife's testimony. Every wall had come down, and there was nowhere left to run. First-degree murder and concealment of a homicidal death, the prosecutor announced. He's being held without bond. There would be no more alibis. No more Oregon stories or hidden wives or claims that someone else had pulled the trigger. The charges were filed, the evidence was catalogued, and Raymond Reed sat in a cell while the justice system began its slow, methodical work. The prosecutors who built the case against Raymond spent nearly a year preparing Faith Tyler to testify. Knowing her willingness to speak would be the pressure that cracked him. Faith didn't want to do it. She was terrified. Didn't want to sit in that courtroom and relive the night her husband came home bloody. The lies she'd believed. The car she'd helped him clean, thinking it was self-defense. But she also knew that for Tabitha Milton Rush, and for Tabitha's family, she had to speak. She was the only witness to what Raymond had said and done after the murder. "I know it's hard, but we need you to be ready to testify," the prosecutors told her through the months of preparation. Faith nodded. "For Tabitha, for her family, I have to do this." It was her willingness to speak, not any confession of his conscience, that would end it. The trial was set to start the Monday after Thanksgiving 2013. Faith was prepared.
Dumped, traveling together, until her phone goes dead.
And the woman Raymond had tried to use as his shield, now ready to testify against him. Everything was in place. Then, the day before Thanksgiving, Raymond's attorneys sent word.
"It was Faith. It was my wife."
He's willing to plead guilty. The courtroom went quiet. Guilty to first-degree murder and concealment. Raymond Reed stood before the judge and admitted what the evidence had already proven. He'd killed Tabitha Milton Rush. He'd shot her twice in the left temple while she sat beside him in his car. He'd dumped her body in a ravine 30 miles north. He'd lied about Oregon. Tried to blame his wife. Built wall after wall to hide behind. And when the one person who could have protected him prepared to tell the truth instead, he had nothing left. There would be no trial. No jury. No moment where Faith had to sit on a witness stand and face the man who'd made her an accomplice by convincing her it was. Self-defense. The sentence came down in November 2013. 38 years in Department of Corrections. Raymond Reed would be 84 years old if he ever walked out. The prosecutor who'd worked the case from the day Tabitha's body was found in that Bethalto ravine looked at the sentence and the guilty plea and said what people connected to murder cases often say when the defendant finally admits the truth. So I was satisfied with that sentence. 38 years. He'd be 84 if he ever walked out. It was the closest thing to enough that this case would ever give. The sentence closed the legal case, but it couldn't close the shape of the absence Tabitha Milton Rush left behind. 38 years was a number on paper, a locked cell, a measure of justice, but it couldn't fill the house that had gone quiet. Couldn't answer the question of what she was supposed to get back. Tabitha's home had always been full of people who came just to be near her. Friends dropping by without calling first. Laughter in the kitchen. The kind of warmth that made everyone feel welcome. She had a spirit that drew people in. Generous. Open. The type of person who made her house feel alive because she made everyone around her feel seen. Her door was always open. And then she opened it to the wrong person. One time too many. One man she trusted when she shouldn't have. She'd been cancer-free for 6 months when Raymond Reed walked into her life in the summer of 2012. 6 months of claiming back what the disease had stolen. Her health, her energy, her hair growing back, the future she'd fought so hard to keep. She was a breast cancer survivor looking for a second chance at the life the illness had taken. She was supposed to get her whole life back. Years stretching ahead that she'd earned by surviving what so many people don't. Instead, she got 6 months. And then a man who couldn't let her be free.
I would never, ever kill someone.
The timing is the cruelest part of this story. A life won back from cancer. A future reclaimed. and then taken by the one danger she couldn't scan for, couldn't biopsy, couldn't catch early. There's no test for the threat that shows up at your door saying it just wants to talk. Nobody knows what Raymond said to get Tabitha back into that car after she'd sent him away that evening. Debbie had just left. Tabitha was home, safe, behind a door she could have kept closed. But something Raymond said made her open it one last time. Some lie, some plea, some final manipulation that sounded enough like concern or apology or need that she believed it. That question, what words, what lie, what final manipulation convinced her to get in the car, will never have an answer the record can give. Whatever he said, she believed it enough to go with him, and 30 miles north in a vehicle on a dark interstate heading toward Bethalto. He shot her twice in the left temple and left her body in a ravine where it would take 5 days for someone to find her. The friends and family who buried Tabitha Milton Rush carry an arithmetic that will never balance. She beat breast cancer. She won back 6 months of her life. And then she couldn't outlive a man's need to own her. That's the shape of the loss, not just that she died, but that she'd survived so much to claim those 6 months. And Raymond Reed took every year that should have come after. The second chance she'd been looking for lasted half a year. He married a woman to be his alibi. In the end, she was the witness who buried him.
Off. They had to unbolt the seats, and that's where they found blood.
But with a sentence that could never bring her back. The people who loved Tabitha carry a weight that 38 years in prison can't lift. She beat breast cancer. She reclaimed 6 months of her life. And then she was taken by the one danger she couldn't scan for, couldn't fight with treatment or willpower or hope. The arithmetic of that loss, surviving the disease but not the man, is something her family and friends will carry forever. If there's anything this case teaches, it's that the threats we prepare for aren't always the ones that find us. Tabitha saw doctors, got screenings, won a battle most people don't survive. But violence doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't announce itself. And sometimes it comes from the person standing at your door saying they just want to talk. If this story moved you, please take a moment to leave a comment below, share your thoughts, or just let me know you were here. If you'd like more stories like this one, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, feel free to share it with them. Thank you for listening to Tabitha's Story with me. This account is based on a real case, with some scenes dramatized to convey the emotional truth of what happened.
It's just so heartbreaking that she was able to survive cancer, but she wasn't able to survive this brutal man.